Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dennis. I'm Christopher Mulvey. I'm a principal of Safdie Architects in Boston. I'm the director of the Shanghai office, and I oversee the research fellowship program that we have within our office that I'll talk a bit today about as well. Over the past 4 decades, one of the main aims of our practice has been to develop livable collective spaces within dense urban environments. So today, using a number of the recent projects that our firm has done, I will try and show how the principles that we first established with Habitat 67 in Montreal have evolved across a number of different building types and in a number of different geographic locations. The mission of Habitat was really to try and transcend the decade-old malaise associated with apartment living and try and propose a new typology for urban dwelling. Habitat quite literally sought to position the individual home within a larger community and to provide amenities that were not typically associated with urban living. Habitat was also as much a technical innovation as it was a typological innovation. All the units were prefabricated on site as part of the World's Expo in 1967 and literally hoisted right into position. Habitat connected the individual residences, the individual homes, through a series of elevated pedestrian streets that ran every 4 floors, providing access to each of the different units. And this notion of an elevated street or raising the public space off the street level is something that we would continue to explore in a number of projects since the construction of Habitat. A view of the project set within the St. Lawrence River. And it quite literally sought to provide a garden and a terrace for each of the units. So all 158 of the apartments had an open air terrace. Those units that were combined of a series of blocks had multiple views, but each unit had views on all 4 sides, all 4 orientations, with a park facing back towards the city. For Everyone a Garden was a publication that came in the years after Habitat was completed. And in this document, Moshe would lay out the basic tenets or principles that would really become the basis of his work and would work to define and shape the work over the next 40 years. It put forth a humanism, and it was concerned with really making appropriate spaces both for the individual and for the collective within the city. After Habitat was completed, a number of Habitat-type projects were proposed in Montreal, to Rochester, to Jerusalem, Puerto Rico, across the globe as a way to try and expand and proliferate this notion of a mass customized dwelling. While each of these, the next 3 or 4 slides, clearly is a variation on the original Habitat, they were each designed in context to their specific local climate, the cultural conditions, local issues, and local requirements. Each also sought to look and explore various geometries, various organizations, various arrangements as a way to try and increase some of the efficiency and increase the buildability that was put forth by Habitat. This is a proposal for New York, where the focus obviously was more on increasing the density and trying to scale up the original proposal. A proposal for Habitat, Puerto Rico, where the focus was really looking at alternative geometries that would allow for increased and more efficient structural approaches for the project. But none of those projects were built. And while Habitat was really lauded for its optimism and for its utopian ideals, the cost of habitating, let's say, really could not compete with the more traditional and standard building typologies and residential typologies of that time. So throughout Moshe's career, it really became a search for how can the ideals that were put forth in Habitat really find their way to take form, and how could they really be employed to meet some of the criticisms and demands of the original project. So 40 years after Habitat, about 6 years ago, Moshe felt it was time to really revisit the first principles and try and address some of these concerns. At that point, we began the study. We instituted a research fellowship program within our office. We would bring in a number of research fellows every year within the office itself, remove them from academia, but give them a practice-based environment. But it allowed us, or sort of the design staff, to really explore topics outside of the constraints of some of the commission projects. We began to ask questions of the original project as how could it be constructed more efficiently? How dense could it become before it started to succumb to some of the issues it was trying to alleviate? How could it be made more affordable or more sustainable? So each of these different variations that became the habitat of the future, let's say, focus on a particular aspect of the original and trying to increase density or simplify construction. Some were focused more on buildability, so the variation and the stacking was much more regularized. And some really tried to increase the density and tried to deal with some of the concerns of the original project. But in the end, each of them were still evaluated in terms of how they were able to provide some of the basic principles put forth by Habitat, such as collective spaces for the community, individuality within the whole, landscape and gardens and terraces for each of the residents. I think one of the things that it looked for beyond the original Habitat was that it not only provided spaces for the individual, but it now started to provide spaces for the collective, or spaces for smaller communities within the development. We were fortunate enough to get a number of residential commissions soon after this initial study, and so the design research efforts of the fellowship really would go on to inform a lot of the works that we would be doing over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think it evolved from everyone a garden to garden bridges and sky parks and urban windows and other techniques and approaches that we and others developed as a way to try and increase the livability of the projects and also deal with some of the issues that were mentioned earlier about the mega scale. This is a project under construction now, just east of Beijing, along the Bohai Sea. It's about 3,500 units spread across the site on about 32 to 33 floors. And rather than creating a typical wall, let's say, of development or of construction, it was really looking at trying to create these large windows through the project, sort of these urban windows that would allow for views from the city through to the sea and from the sea back through the project. And so what it afforded was the framing of these views or of these windows allowed us to create these elevated gardens or elevated parks and spaces for the public. It allowed for light to come through the project and actually increase the amount of units having frontage to the water and receiving daylight. The next project, just moving into construction now, is a residential project in the Bishan section of Singapore. It's a very tight 12,000 square meter site with about 500 units. So if we look back to the original Habitat, the density was 1.6, the FAR was 1.6. This reaches about 4.9. So obviously it's really looking at trying to find ways to increase the viability of the original proposal. And the strategy here was to create these two towers that would be oriented in the north-south direction, slightly bypassing each other, so one wouldn't obstruct the views of the other, with the two towers connected at 3 points, 3 different bridge elements, each of the elements containing a different type of public amenity, whether it was a boardwalk, a landscape garden feature, or a pool, or sort of a water feature for the residents. Within each of those bridges, they are open air and open to the sky, so it creates sort of a lush landscaped environment again, elevated within the project to provide better access for the units, for the residences, but also give them views that are not typically enjoyed within the public community spaces. This is a proposal for Mulund, outside Mumbai, India. The building blocks here are obviously much more rationalized than some of the previous schemes in terms of the terraces. But what we're looking at here is approximately the same size site as the previous project, but 1,200 units. So in a sense, it's doubling the density, it's doubling the FAR, close to 10. And again, we're looking at different scales of the development, or different scales of achieving some of the original aims. Here, obviously everyone is not having an individual garden, but we are trying to create these tiers of gardens for the different residences and for the communities. And so it doesn't achieve the same level of, the infiltration of the landscape is not to the same extent as the original proposal, but we're trying to create a balance between the economies of actually achieving the projects and still providing the livable environment that we're aimed to create. The last two projects we'll look at are mixed-use developments, each in excess of 1 million square meters. And I think within our practice, we've looked at the evolution of trying to look at bringing in landscape and landscape elements as a way to try and break down the scale of a project and break down the individual's relationship to the project. But when projects get of a certain scale, they require other methods or other techniques to try and break down that scale, let's say. The first is Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, which opened a few years ago. It has 3,000 hotel rooms in the 3 towers, a convention center, a casino, 2 public theaters, the Art Science Museum on the promontory, a large spine of retail, a public boardwalk, and the Sky Park, which spans across the top of the hotel towers. And again, the decision here in terms of the separation of the hotel towers was just as much to try and create this porosity of views through the project rather than sort of an edge to the city or an edge to Marina Bay. The original concept, and really from the outset, the intent was to try and create a garden from which to view the city. And so it developed a system of a layered system of landscape from the boardwalk all the way up the public promontory, up the sides of the hotel towers to the Sky Park to try and create this sort of a landscape edge to the city. These are sections through the Sky Park showing the pool, the boardwalk, and the landscape zone, the gardenscape area. The pool faces the city side, and the landscape faces the gardens by the bay next door and out to the sea. A plan of the Sky Park, again, showing the relationship between approximately 50% landscape, the rest is boardwalk, hardscape, and the public amenities from the swimming pools to the restaurants. And at the end of the cantilever, the end of the 65-meter cantilever, is the public observatory. And again, here you can see the relationship between the landscape on one side facing the bay and the pools and the boardwalk facing back towards the city. The last project that I'll show is something we're just beginning to work on now, in the early stage of schematic design. It's for a Raffles City development in Chongqing. It's located just fronting the historic Jiaotamen Plaza to the north. It's at the convergence of the Yangtze and the Jiaoling rivers. The program, again, is about 1.1 million square meters. There's a 5-story retail podium on which 6 towers sit. The towers contain residences, offices, 2 hotels, service apartments, restaurants, public observatory, and here a glass-enclosed conservatory. And I think what we tried to achieve here in terms of the relationship of the project to the city was in terms of the position of the towers, was to arrange them around the perimeter of the site to try and create a very large central park, or sort of a public space, a public garden, for an area of the city that does not have that type of an amenity. The towers are fairly thin, 30 meters in the narrow dimension, oriented north-south. So again, all the views from the city and along the streets have views through the project. Again, creating these large windows, windows to the out to the river and out to the other side of the Jialing River. The section, given the topography of Chongqing, which is an incredibly hilly city, we're able to actually enter the project on the roof and tuck the retail podium beneath the landscape. So again, we're creating this very large public park for the city, trying to reconnect them back to the plaza, reconnect them back to the water, and then also try and provide this landscape carpet that climbs up the hillside or climbs up the side of the towers, culminating in the landscape conservatory. Again, I think in while at the Sky Park in Marina Bay was really a platform that was somewhat discrete from the tower, sitting above them, and was really focused on outdoor activities. The conservatory here is very much engaged with the towers and houses different hotel and residential functions, such as lounges or clubhouses, as well as sort of a landscape garden for the public. A view from the south, again, looking up on the southern faces, both the residences and the office towers have a series of terraced, thick and thin landscape gardens, again, to try and improve the view from the city, looking towards a park or looking towards landscape in the foreground to the river. An elevated evening view, again, just showing some of the activity within the park itself. And sort of in summary, I think what we've really been trying to do with some of these more recent projects, as the cities and the mega cities continue to grow and the populations intensify, it begins to challenge the relationship of the individual to the city and the individual to the built environment. And what we're really trying to do is try and maintain the basic tenets that we put forth about habitation and livability, and try and find ways to humanize this mega scale development. Thank you.